Many of us grow up with a belief that self-respect means having a reputation, being admired, or being held in high regard by others. Society teaches us that self-respect comes when we rise to a position of status, power, or external recognition. Family expectations, peer comparisons, and the subtle pressures of our surroundings convince us that only when we succeed according to worldly standards will we truly have value. And so, we keep chasing an image, a shadow built by others, hoping that once we attain it, we will feel more respectable, more worthy. But is that really true? Buddhism offers a completely different perspective, simple yet profound. Self-respect does not come from the outside, but from within. Not from the gaze of others, but from right understanding and living in harmony with truth. In the Dharma, self-respect is not something granted by others. It is the natural fruit of living mindfully, without betraying oneself. Ask yourself this: if your sense of self-respect depends entirely on others' opinions, their praise, or their recognition, can it ever be solid? The moment people turn away when public opinion shifts, when fame fades, will that self-respect still exist? Or will it vanish with the very things you've been clinging to? This is precisely where the Dharma invites us to look deeply. For when we ground our worth on fragile conditions, we live in constant anxiety, fear of loss, and insecurity. But if we root it in wisdom, in the recognition that our true mind is already free and pure, then even when the world does not acknowledge us, we still stand firm in self-respect. On this journey, Buddha's wisdom journey invites you to explore more deeply. What is true self-respect? How can we live without chasing the eyes of others, yet still shine from within? And most importantly, how can we release the misunderstanding of self-respect that has left so many exhausted in life's endless race? The confusion about self-respect is the root of much suffering. People fear being laughed at, fear being judged, fear not measuring up. From that fear, we put on countless masks: the mask of success, the mask of power, the mask of wealth, even the mask of false virtue. Yet none of these bring liberation. They only bind us tighter to the cycle of suffering. In the light of the Dharma, we learn that true self-respect is not a performance, but an authentic way of living. It is when we live with mindfulness, when we honor our own truth, when we refuse to betray our heart just for the sake of praise. It is when we let go of attachments, stand tall in humility, and live simply yet meaningfully. And as an opening for this journey, I invite you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, if tomorrow, all your fame, recognition, and status were to disappear, would you still feel worthy of respect? That is the beginning of discovery, the doorway to liberation, the very path the Buddha has pointed out. In daily life, self-respect is often misunderstood as a kind of possession that must be protected at all costs, like a dazzling facade we put up so that others will recognize and acknowledge us. But in the light of the Buddha's teachings, self-respect is neither something distant nor something borrowed from the eyes of others. It is a quiet current, an inner strength that arises when we live in harmony with truth, with conscience, with compassion and wisdom. And to see the true roots of self-respect, we must return to the core of what the Buddha taught: seeing impermanence and non-self. The first source of genuine self-respect begins with seeing impermanence and non-self. As long as we believe there is a permanent self that must be defended, we are easily wounded by judgment or comparison. A single compliment can lift us up, while a single criticism can bring us down. At such a time, self-respect is no more than a fragile boat adrift on life's waves. But when we see clearly that everything is impermanent, our feelings, reputation, status, even this very body, which is nothing more than the coming together and dispersing of conditions, then there is nothing left to cling to or hold tight. Seeing non-self, we realize that we are not a fixed entity that needs to prove itself, but a flowing stream of interdependent causes and conditions. In this vision, we naturally loosen our grip on what others may think, let go of the fear of losing face, and touch a deep peace within. This is the fertile soil where the seed of true self-respect takes root. Living with right action. If impermanence and non-self are the ground of wisdom, then right action is the practical path that nurtures self-respect. True self-respect cannot arise when our actions go against our conscience. A person may be praised as successful in the world, but if deep down they know they have deceived, harmed, or exploited others, then that praise is only a thin coat of paint. Inside, unease and shame will gnaw away, leaving them never truly able to feel worthy. In the Buddha's teaching, self-respect comes from living with right action, acting in alignment with wisdom and compassion. Even a small deed done in truth carries greater power than 1,000 displays of false pretense. When we know we are walking on a wholesome path, even if no one sees it, an unshakable confidence quietly arises within. That is dignity that nothing can erode. Right speech and right livelihood. Another root of genuine self-respect is right speech and right livelihood. Many think of self-respect as image or reputation, but in truth, it is cultivated through each word we speak and each deed we do in daily life. Words of truth, not deceitful, not harsh, not divisive, not frivolous, are ways we respect ourselves. Each time we utter a falsehood to please someone, we lose a piece of our own integrity. Each time we speak in anger and wound another, even in a fleeting moment, regret will eventually weigh upon us. Self-respect cannot survive when our speech and actions lack mindfulness. By contrast, when we plant seeds through right speech and right livelihood, through clear, truthful words and wholesome actions, self-respect blossoms naturally. There is no need to force ourselves to believe, "I am valuable." That value is revealed in the serenity of a clear conscience, compassion toward ourselves. One aspect often forgotten is compassion for ourselves. Many people think self-respect means being strict, relentlessly pushing for perfection. But in reality, self-respect is not about punishing ourselves. The Dharma teaches that unless we can care for and love ourselves with wisdom and compassion, all ideas of self-respect become nothing but a burden. True self-respect means listening deeply to our own suffering, forgiving the mistakes we have made, and learning how to rise again after falling. Self-respect does not mean denying flaws, but courageously facing them with compassion. When we stop condemning ourselves and instead nurture ourselves with understanding, we step firmly into the field of lasting dignity. Respect for others. Finally, self-respect and respect for others cannot be separated. A truly self-respecting person recognizes the equality of all beings. Seeing that everyone shares Buddha nature, that all beings suffer and long for happiness, we no longer look down on anyone, nor need to elevate ourselves by lowering others. On the contrary, it is through respecting others that we nourish respect within ourselves. Each time we act with reverence and compassion, we affirm our own dignity, Knowing that we do not harm, humiliate, or exploit others allows us to look directly into our own eyes in the mirror and see a genuine integrity. All these roots together form the foundation of self-respect in the Buddhist view. Not dependent on praise or blame, not built on illusions of success, but nourished by wisdom, compassion, truthful speech, and wholesome action. Self-respect is no longer a role we struggle to maintain, but a natural quality, steady and unmoved, like a mountain standing firm against the storm. From the lens of the Dharma, self-respect is no longer a vague concept or a slogan repeated in books. It is a living quality, arising moment by moment in daily life. It does not come from whether others admire us or not, but from the way we face ourselves, our thoughts, our words, our actions. If earlier we explored the roots that nourish self-respect, impermanence, non-self, right action, right speech, compassion, and respect for others, then now we can look more deeply at the fruit they bear. For when self-respect is cultivated in the right way, it not only brings peace to ourselves, but radiates outward, becoming a guiding light for the whole community. Self-respect, a quiet strength. The wonder of genuine self-respect is that it never needs to be displayed. A person with self-respect does not need to declare, "I am worthy," nor compare themselves with anyone. Their strength lies in their presence, in the calmness of their gaze, in their unhurried steps, in words that are simple yet sincere. By contrast, when we lack self-respect, we easily fall into the trap of chasing recognition. We clothe ourselves in countless layers, the cloak of success, the cloak of power, the cloak of false virtue. And the more we struggle, the more exhausted we become, for these layers never truly bring us peace. The Dharma points us toward another way, to return inward and plant the seed of self-respect in truthfulness. When we know that we have not betrayed our conscience, that we have not deceived or harmed, then even if no one sees, self-respect still shines. Self-respect and freedom. In life, many people trade away their self-respect for convenience. They do what they know is wrong just to please others. They choose a false image over their authentic self, but in doing so, they lose the greatest freedom, the freedom to live in truth. On the other hand, when we live with self-respect, fear loses its grip. We can smile in the face of both praise and blame. We can remain steady when status or possessions fall away, because we know our true worth does not depend on them. This is a freedom that no amount of wealth or power can buy. Self-respect and freedom are two sides of the same coin. Where there is self-respect, there is freedom. Where there is freedom, self-respect grows even stronger. This is the virtuous circle the Buddha called the path of liberation. Self-respect as a lamp of guidance. What is most precious is that self-respect does not stop with oneself. A person who embodies it naturally becomes a source of inspiration for others. They need no elaborate speeches. Their life itself becomes the teaching. A child who lives with self-respect brings peace to their parents. A teacher with self-respect earns the trust of students. A leader with self-respect strengthens the faith of the community. And a practitioner with self-respect becomes a lamp for those still lost in the dark. In the scriptures, the Buddha taught, one who keeps the precepts, who lives truthfully, that one possesses a virtue greater than any outer adornment. This reminder is like a lantern, showing us that self-respect is not found in appearances, but in the quality of the heart. Self-respect and compassion, the twin wings of liberation. If self-respect stands alone without compassion, it can harden into rigidity. But when self-respect is carried on the wings of compassion, it becomes the very force of liberation. Compassion allows us to see that everyone is on a journey, and everyone stumbles. Instead of looking with contempt, we learn to look with understanding. Self-respect then ceases to be a wall of separation and becomes a bridge of connection. It allows us to stand firmly in our own values while still opening our hearts to support others. And in respecting others, we deepen our respect for ourselves. For respect is not something bestowed from above, but the recognition of the inherent equality of all beings. The journey of return. Ultimately, self-respect is a journey of returning to ourselves, not a return to decorate a new identity, but a return to stripping away the masks we have worn for too long. It is a return to the truth of who we are, to the pure heart that has always been present. The journey is not easy. It requires courage to face our shadows, patience to release old attachments, and mindfulness to avoid new illusions. But the farther we walk, the more we realize nothing is more precious than the peace of looking honestly into ourselves and smiling. And this is the message that Buddha's wisdom journey seeks to share. True self-respect is not a strategy for worldly success, but a spiritual path toward liberation. Once again, let us pause and ask, if today you gave up the need for recognition from others, what would remain within you to live upon? Perhaps it is in that very answer that you will come closer to the truth of life and to genuine self-respect. Self-respect, in the light of the Buddha's teachings, is no longer a distant concept or a goal to chase at all costs. It is not measured by the approving eyes or praise of others, but by the ease that arises within when we live authentically, when we no longer try to wear fragile garments of fame just to be recognized. A person with true self-respect does not need to stand out in the crowd, yet they remain steady in the storms of life, because they know their dignity cannot be shaken by praise or blame, gain or loss. They quietly walk the path of right conduct, where every word is guided by right speech, and every action is supported by right livelihood. Their respect for themselves is not a closed pride, but a boundless compassion, one that embraces their own imperfections and extends outward to all beings. Perhaps, at some point in life, each of us has sat quietly and wondered, who am I, and what am I truly living for? That question, if faced with honesty, is the very doorway back to genuine self-respect. For when we dare to acknowledge our weaknesses and fears, we also take the first step on the path of spiritual maturity. And when we no longer try to avoid, hide, or judge ourselves, the seed of self-respect, of inner freedom, begins to sprout. In daily life, self-respect often shows up in the simplest ways. It might be the moment you pause and choose not to say hurtful words, even when anger is burning inside. It might be the morning you decide to sit quietly and breathe mindfully, instead of rushing into the whirlwind of tasks. It might be the difficult decision to let go of a harmful habit, simply because you know you deserve to live in health, lightness, and peace. Self-respect is not perfection. It does not require you to never make mistakes, only that you remain sincere enough to learn from them. It is not about comparing yourself with anyone else, but about gently reminding yourself, I too am worthy of love. I too am worthy of a peaceful life, without needing to pretend to be accepted. When you begin to respect yourself through mindfulness, ethics, and compassion, you are not only planting seeds of peace within your own life, you are also radiating that energy to those around you. People may forget the words you speak, but they will remember the calmness of your presence, the way you walk through life without haste, without competing, without imposing. This is self-respect transformed into virtue, a quiet flame that lights the way for others. And perhaps, in this noisy world where so many chase after success, status, and appearances, the presence of even one person living with true self-respect is all the more precious. They are like a clear stream flowing through a dry forest, reminding us that real peace does not lie in how many admire us, but in whether we can truly listen to, understand, and honor ourselves. Today, I invite you to pause for a moment. Place your hand over your heart and ask, am I living with respect for myself? Are you being honest with yourself in your choices and steps? Or are you still letting fear, comparison, or outside voices dictate the way you live? If so, know that you don't need to change everything at once. You only need to begin with the small things. Perhaps it's the courage to speak the truth instead of hiding. Perhaps it's the gentleness to forgive yourself for a mistake from the past. Perhaps it's the strength to say no to something that doesn't align with you, even if it might disappoint others. These small steps, little by little, will bring you back to the firm foundation of self-respect. Not one given by others, but one you cultivate within. And then, you will realize a simple yet profound truth. Self-respect is not pride or superiority. It is a state of peace, where you can sit quietly within yourself, no longer swayed by the winds of praise or blame, gain or loss. It is where you can smile, not because you have achieved everything, but because you have finally come home to yourself. How can you begin respecting yourself today? Let this question echo in your heart. The answer may come right away, or it may unfold slowly through quiet observation and lived experience. But most importantly, once you truly wish to return, the door will open. Before closing, I warmly invite you, dear friends of Buddha's wisdom journey, to join in nurturing this path of returning to genuine self-respect. If these reflections touch you, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue walking together through profound teachings of the Dharma, meditation, and the art of mindful living. And please share in the comments below. What is one way you will begin respecting yourself today? It may be a small act, a gentle reminder, or a firm decision. Who knows? Your sharing might become the inspiration for someone else to rediscover their own strength. Because when each of us learns to respect ourselves, this world becomes more compassionate, peaceful, and free. And that is the most precious gift the Dharma can bring to life.